Welcome back, everyone. Well, we now have a procedural foliage spawner asset created, and when we added this to our level, that created a procedural foliage volume, and it populated it with our procedural foliage spawner. Then what we did is inside of our procedural foliage spawner, we added the foliage type of some trees. Now, what we're going to be doing over the course of these next few videos is exploring some of the settings that are available for our foliage types, and this just kind of building out our spawner step by step. Now, some of these steps are going to seem like they're redundant with what we covered in foliage mode, but just for the sake of being thorough, I'm going to be going through them one by one. Some of the settings in future videos are going to be very specific to the procedural foliage system. So we're going to start off here talking about our placement settings. Our placement settings in our foliage type. Again, remember, a procedural foliage spawner consists of different foliage types that you tell it to spawn. So we're going to be working inside of the lone foliage type that is populating our spawner right here, and that is our tree foliage type. So I'm going to come under my foliage types folder right here. We're going to double click on our FT tree. And we're going to be talking about the placement settings right up in here. Now, we did cover a lot of these when we talked about foliage mode. Z offset, I currently want to set this back to default. That's going to change how much the foliage is set offset off the ground, if you will, between a random range, a min and a max I got of -500 and 100. Things like random yaw is going to change up the rotation randomly, if you will. Ground slope angle is the rules for determining valid ground slopes that it can be placed upon. So in this case, I can't place it on a slope that is 60 degrees, or anything, I should say, higher than 45 degrees. And then our height restrictions that restrict how high or low in elevation trees can be populated upon. So the foliage spawner will respect all of these settings up here. Now, I should collapse this arrow right here. We do have some advanced placement settings right here that you can click right down here. And I did show you before the inclusion landscape layers. If we were to add one here, we could specify what landscape layer this can appear upon, only that landscape layer. But I want to go the opposite route this time and do the exclusion landscape layers. I'm going to specify a layer name that I do not want our trees to be spawned upon with our procedural foliage spawner. So I'm going to add an element here, clicking on this, and it doesn't make sense for trees to grow out of rock, so I'm going to type in rock. And again, this down here is the exclusion layer weighting. So this is essentially how much does the landscape have to be rock, and this is, I painted some rock out here ahead of time. How much does it have to be weighted in rock for me not to have it? And I'm going to say, yeah, even if it's 0%, actually let's do 50% rock. If it's 50% rock, we're not going to have it out there. So let's go ahead and save this. And now we're going to jump back to our level. And what we need to do is we need to grab our procedural foliage volume right here. That's this yellow box. You want to make sure you're in place mode when you do this. If you're in, foliage edit mode and you're trying to grab these bounds, it's a little bit deceiving, thinking that you can click on it when you can't. So you want to be in placement mode. Click the bounds of our procedural foliage volume. Let's drag and drop it over our 3 different layers here. So we've got, this is a path layer out here, this brownish one. Then we've got our rock, this is a grayish layer, and then I've got a little bit kind of bleeding over onto this grass. So you can see as I move this layer, the trees don't come with, but with this selected, if I come under the details panel, under procedural foliage, right down here there is a re-simulate button. So as soon as I press this, you can see that we now have trees that are spawning on my path layer, my grass, but not my rock, because in my placement settings I said I am excluding the rock. Excluding the rock. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, yes indeed. All right, guys, that is going to do it all for our foliage type placement settings here for our procedural foliage volume. In the next one, we're going to be covering some foliage type instance settings. We'll see you there.